Hi, my name is Zach, and I live with OCD, and I'm the founder of OCDcoachingservices.com. And our goal is to work with fellow OCDers like yourself to get you on your path to reclaiming your life from OCD. And we approach OCD recovery from the lived experience side. So we know what it's like to live with OCD. We know what the feelings are like, what the thoughts are like, your brain, because the same thing happens in our brains. And we also know what works, right? That path to OCD recovery is a blueprint, and we can follow that blueprint, and we work with our clients in a hands-on, supportive, customized approach to get them on that path to recovery. So if you want to learn more about those coaching services, you can go to OCDcoachingservices.com, and we would love to work with you. So we hope to hear from you in the future. Now, with that being said, you probably clicked into this video because you want to learn what that roadmap is to OCD recovery. And my goal with this workshop, this video, is to teach you everything that I wish I would have known back in 2016 when I was diagnosed with OCD, to give me the blueprint so that I could actually start to work towards recovery. There was nothing like this back in 2016, and this prolonged my OCD recovery journey for many, many years. I want to fast track that for you. I just want to give you all the information that I know that worked for me and has worked for our coaching clients in the next 45 minutes. So you can treat this video like almost like a book. Go back to it, bookmark things, take notes, whatever feels appropriate for you, but use this as a resource and a guide. And I hope that you find this video super helpful. Now, before we jump into the actual content, I do want to take just a couple minutes to share my story, my journey of OCD recovery, so that you understand we're on the same page. I've been where you are right now, and I know what it feels like. So for me, all of a sudden in 2016, I was flooded with intrusive thoughts that I'd never experienced before. And within a matter of a couple of months, I was experiencing intrusive thoughts from the moment I woke up until the moment I went to bed. I was severely anxious, pounding heart all day long. And it was exhausting, right? It was like my mind was racing constantly. I couldn't stop the thoughts. I was super anxious. And every day it was just the hardest thing to get through the day. And I felt so tired and exhausted. And within a couple of months, a second symptom had crept in, which was depression. And so now I'm flooded with intrusive thoughts. I'm constantly anxious, and I'm feeling depressed because my brain feels out of control and I don't know what to do. And I eventually hit my rock bottom moment where I'm like, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, if this is what my life is going to be like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, every single moment of my day is just consumed with these thoughts and compulsions. Of course, I didn't know what a compulsion was back then. Maybe you're still learning about your compulsions or learning what a compulsion is, and we'll talk about that in the workshop. But I was just obsessing and compulsing all day long, feeling anxious, depressed, and hopeless. And when I hit that rock bottom moment, I called up my parents and I was like, I don't know what's going on with my brain. I just know that I need help, and you might be in that spot right now. And they encouraged me to seek assistance. And thankfully, in late 2016, I was formally diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. So it was, on the one hand, very encouraging. I'm like, okay, I know what's going on with my brain. And there was a sense of relief there. Maybe you are experiencing that too. But then on the other side of things, I'm like, I'm also have this thing called OCD, and I'm going to live with it for the rest of my life. What am I supposed to do to feel normal again? What am I supposed to do to feel like I can get my life back and live a high quality of life? Maybe you relate to that as well. And for me, this looked like a journey that spanned many years, where I went through formal OCD treatment, doing ERP, or exposure and response prevention. I learned the mindset shifts and the lifestyle changes that were necessary to get my life back. And after I went on that journey, it was so transformative for me. I'm like, gosh, this was the hardest thing I've ever been through. I obviously still live with OCD to this day, but it doesn't interfere with my life. And I just felt so compelled to want to help others. The one thing that I don't want for you that happened for me is, like, this information really wasn't readily available in 2016. It was really, really hard to find. And that's why I wanted to create this workshop, to give you that roadmap to accelerate that recovery process. Because once you learn the skills and the mindsets, all it takes is implementation. Now, of course, that can be easier said than done. But once you learn the process, you just stick with it, stay consistent, and you can reclaim your life. Now, I will share with you, I think that this is important to share, and I want to show you this, so I'm going to share my screen here, is that All these years later, despite living with OCD, I live an extremely high caliber life. I live the exact life that I want. I could not be more proud of myself. I'm just going to flat out say it, because back in 2016, I felt like there was no hope. I literally felt like I was never going to get my life back to a place that I felt proud of. And yet, all these years later, as you can see on this slide here, number one, I'm married to my soulmate. I absolutely adore my wife. And back in 2016, I never thought it would be possible to have a successful relationship. And yet, not only do I have a successful relationship, it's thriving, it's loving. And like I said, she's absolutely my soulmate, and I'm just so grateful for her. Here in the middle, I wrote my first book, You're Not Alone, which was a guide for 18 to 24-year-olds to help them overcome anxiety and depression. And that was released in October of 2020. And again, I mean, it's just amazing to me that all these years later, when I was in the darkest place of my life, that I could end up being somebody that writes a book, a mental health book, and is able to impact thousands of people around the globe. And I never dreamed that to be possible. And then over here on this side, as you can see, this is me. I'm on the right-hand side in that puffy jacket, but I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with my dad and one of my all-time best friends. And if you don't know this, Kilimanjaro is the tallest standalone mountain in the world. It's really, really cool accomplishment. It's something that I'm super proud of. And back in 2016, when I was frankly in the OCD cycle, sad, anxious, and scared, I never thought that that would be possible. And yet here I am accomplishing that. And so I share this with you to say, if you're in that spot right now where you are just like, Zach, I am struggling, I don't know what to do, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I'm scared, I'm sad, I'm overwhelmed, I've been there too. I know what it feels like, and we can reclaim our lives, but we do have to go through the process of OCD recovery. So let's talk about that, because I do want to share the key takeaways. So in this workshop, there are going to be 3 key takeaways that we talk about. Number one, I think that this is super important. We have to talk about the OCD cycle and how it works. The OCD cycle is this predictable cycle that all of us OCDers are in. Oftentimes we're not aware of it. Once we learn when we're in the cycle, it gives us the opportunity to be able to step out of it and get our lives back. So it's super, super important. I want to share that at the beginning of the workshop. The second thing is the most important mindset shift in OCD recovery. This mindset shift is so, so important. And until you make this shift, and I've seen this with so many fellow OCDers, and it was definitely the case for me, we're going to stay stuck in the OCD cycle and really not be able to step out. And it's because the way that we're thinking about OCD recovery is keeping us stuck. So I'm going to share that mindset shift. And then I'm going to talk about the core techniques to break free from OCD. So mind you, this is not about curing yourself or ridding yourself of OCD. What it is it's helping you break free from the OCD cycle so that you're not constantly stuck in this obsessive compulsive loop, and you can live a super happy life that's fulfilling, filled with joy and peace and a lot of happy moments. And I'm just really, really excited to share this blueprint with you, because it's the blueprint that I needed back in 2016. So like I mentioned at the beginning, treat this almost as if it's a book. Like, take notes while you're listening, bookmark things, refer back to this, like use this as a helpful guide, because I truly believe in all the information here. It helped me reclaim my life, and it's helped our clients reclaim their lives as well. So without further ado, let's jump right in. First, let's just get level set on what OCD is, right? So OCD is comprised of obsessions and compulsions, and there is a problem-solving component that, I mean, basically at the core of OCD is problem solving. This is why we spend all day long in our heads ruminating, going over the thoughts, and then doing some sort of mental or physical behavior to try to get rid of those thoughts and get rid of those feelings. And at the start of OCD recovery, all of us are hyper fixated on the specific obsessions. For me, OCD started out as sexual orientation OCD. Disclaimer, I have absolutely no issue with people's sexual orientations. I think that people should express their truest selves. But for me, I've always identified as a straight male. And so it came as quite a shock in 2016 when all of a sudden I was being flooded with sexually intrusive thoughts that had never occurred before. And of course, I got wrapped in the OCD cycle, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. That led to the severe anxiety and the deep depression because it felt ego-dystonic or separate from me. Ego-dystonic just means it didn't feel in alignment with who I thought I was. What I learned through the OCD recovery journey, and you might even be starting to learn this yourself, is that at the start, we get really fixated on the specific theme or subtype. That's how we refer to these different subjects, right? Themes, subtypes. But what we end up learning as we go on the journey is that OCD just jumps to whatever kind of content it can bother us with. So you've probably taken a second to look through this. Maybe you're not seeing your theme or your subtype right now. And that can sometimes freak us OCDers out. And I want you to know that this list is not exhaustive. If you don't see yours up here, that's completely okay. OCD can essentially latch itself on to anything because at the core of it is this desire to keep us safe and problem solve. So that's probably why you're feeling a lot of fear. You might be feeling sadness or disgust or overwhelm. Of course, we'll talk about that here in a second. But I want you to know OCD is comprised of these obsessions, these themes, these subtypes. If you don't see yours up here, that's okay. On the other side, we have compulsions. These are the behaviors that we do mentally or physically to try and get rid of the thoughts, right? And that's another thing. At the start of OCD recovery, we are hyper fixated on the thoughts, and we tend to overlook, we don't like the feeling, but we tend to overlook the fact that underneath all of our thoughts is a feeling that we just wish that we could get rid of. And so we do all sorts of things, right? Maybe we avoid people, places, or things that cause the thoughts and feelings to come flooding in. Maybe from the moment we wake up, we start doing mental checking, right? If you're struggling with health OCD, maybe you check your body for any signs of disease or any sort of symptoms. There's reassurance seeking, both with ourselves and from others. Maybe we ask a loved one, hey, do you think I would ever do this? Maybe you're struggling with harm OCD and you're afraid that you're going to snap and hurt somebody. And so you go to a loved one and say, hey, do you think I'd ever do this? They give you reassurance, you feel some relief, and then sure enough, the thoughts come back in. Then we have rumination, right? Rumination is where we're just up in our brains thinking about the thoughts and trying to problem solve it, trying to make sense of it, trying to figure out, in the case when I was struggling with sexual orientation OCD, I would ruminate and think to myself, gosh, was there ever a time in my life where I felt attracted to men? How do I know if that ever actually happened? Did I like the interactions that I had with females? How do I know for sure, right? So trying to problem solve. And then of course we have confessing, counting, repeating actions, and neutralizing. Neutralizing is like if a negative thought comes up, we replace it with a positive thought to try and get rid of it, right? So this is OCD in a nutshell. At the end of the day, OCD is comprised of obsessions and compulsions, and at the core of it is the fact that we are trying to problem solve. We are trying to gain certainty regarding the thoughts that are running through our brain, trying to keep ourselves safe. So, I think this is super important. What are tricks that OCD likes to play on us OCDers? Well, I've listed out 9 here, and I'm going to read through them real quickly. I don't really have OCD. This is one of the most common ones, especially at the start. I always get clients asking me, well, Zach, how do I know that I have OCD? And I almost joke with them. I'm like, if you have to ask that question, and this is like the 7th or 8th time that you've asked me that, maybe it's a sign that you have OCD, right? But OCD likes to try to get us to doubt that we don't have OCD and that the thoughts we're experiencing are actually real. This time is different. Maybe we have some thoughts surge in, we get some sort of reassurance, we get relief, but then the thoughts come rushing in again. We feel scared and we're like, oh my gosh, this time is different. I think I'm actually going to do something. Common trick that OCD plays. Number 3, again, OCD can switch subtypes. So right now, maybe you're fixated on health OCD, but as soon as you teach the brain not to care about those thoughts, it'll just jump to another topic. This feels so real. I hear this a lot from folks maybe that are struggling with, for example, with sexual orientation OCD. They'll be like, Zach, these false attraction feelings feel so real. Like, I know that it's OCD, but I don't know what to do. It's a trick that OCD plays. I'm a horrible person for thinking these thoughts. OCD recovery is confusing. I don't know how to do it. Again, OCD recovery follows a very predictable cyclical pattern and there's a blueprint to recover from it. So OCD will try to confuse us to get us to stop doing that process of recovery and keep us stuck. This time I'll get an answer and it will stick, right? This is maybe when we do the compulsive researching and we think that if we just find the right answer, we'll get relief. I've been living a lie. I'm back at square one. It's like all my work was for nothing. This is when people feel like they've relapsed, that they've put in so much work and now they're experiencing intrusive thoughts again. And this is just another way that OCD tries to discourage us and pull us back into the OCD cycle, which we'll be talking about here in a second. So what are the OCD recovery mindsets? Write these down. The number one indicator that you're going to be able to reclaim your life from OCD is a willingness to do the work. If you are scared, that's okay. But if you're scared and willing to do the work, that is the sign that you're ready. You're ready to start to go through the process of OCD recovery and reclaim your life. Number two, we want to trust the process of recovery. I think us OCDers, we get really impatient, and when we don't get the results that we want right away, we get really wound up, really worked up, and we get really disappointed. And then we stop doing the work, and unsurprisingly, we fall back into the cycle, which leads to number three, setting realistic expectations. Going into this process, we need to know, hey, we're not going to go through 1 to 2 sessions and then feel better. For the majority of us, this is something that we're going to work at for a little bit. We can accelerate the process by knowing what the process is, so it takes the guesswork out of it. But we have to set realistic expectations that we're forming new neural pathways, and this is just going to take a little bit of time. Of course, we want to embrace uncertainty. OCD thrives off of us needing to get an answer, needing to have certainty, and that's where it can trip us up. We have to be willing to allow ourselves to feel feelings, and we're going to talk about that here in a little bit around one of the core aspects of OCD recovery. And of course, we want to know our why. OCD recovery can feel like this huge mountain that we have to tackle. I remember feeling that way in 2016. But knowing your why gives you that motivation to show up and do the work, and that is the difference maker. That is what keeps us trusting the process, staying willing, and showing up every single day to do the work that's necessary to get our lives back. And this is the core mindset shift. Once we're willing, once we're ready, and we're like, okay, Zach, I'm ready to do this. What do I need to do? The first thing we have to talk about is setting the right goal for OCD recovery. See, at the start of OCD recovery, all of us, me included, think that it's all about getting rid of thoughts. I just need to get rid of these thoughts. If I could get rid of these thoughts, then I would be happy. And so what do? Well, we spend all of our time trying to stuff thoughts down, stuff feelings down, trying to suppress them, trying to thought block, trying to neutralize, and we compulse. And what we don't realize is that we're just in this obsessive compulsive loop because our goal for OCD recovery is actually detrimental to us. When we start out, our goal is to get rid of the thoughts. But as you can see here, our goal shouldn't be to stop intrusive thoughts from ever happening again. I guarantee that you've already tried that. That's why you're here watching this video. You've already tried to get rid of the thoughts, and every time you try to get rid of them, they just come back even stronger. That was the same for me. I mean, the amount of times that I spent trying to get rid of thoughts just for them to come back even stronger is countless. And it wasn't until I learned that it wasn't about trying to stop intrusive thoughts from ever happening, but instead it was to teach my brain that it's okay if they do happen. And so this shift is critical because once we start to teach the brain that it's okay if these thoughts happen, we can allow them to bubble up without interacting with them and pass on their own time. Now we're going to talk about that as a skill in OCD recovery here in a bit, but this is the core mindset shift that we have to make. This is the goal that we have to set for ourselves, which is, okay, I think I'm starting to get to a place where I'm okay if these thoughts happen, and I'm not going to try to block them anymore. I'm not going to try to stop them. So let's talk about the OCD cycle. As I said, the OCD cycle works in this extremely predictable cyclical nature, and it works, in my opinion, in a 6-step process. The first thing that happens is we get triggered, and then intrusive thoughts, images, urges, sensations come rushing in. Okay, that's what happens first. Secondly, and we tend to miss this and jump right into this, what we miss is that when these thoughts, feelings, urges, sensations come in, we attach a meaning to it. And the meaning that we normally attach to it, especially at the start, is negative, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. You don't feel like having these thoughts and feelings right now. I didn't either. So at the start, when the thoughts come in, we're like, oh, no, not this. No, not again. What kind of reaction is that? That is a negative reaction. And so it signals to the fear center of the brain that something is wrong. So what happens? We jump right into anxiety and other feelings. I think it's important to note this because OCD, while it can be categorized as an anxiety disorder, it can include emotions like overwhelm, stress, sadness, depression, guilt, disgust, shame, anger, frustration. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So the thoughts come in, we attach a negative meaning, feelings come in, and then we're human beings. We have a desire to remove these feelings. So what do? We do our compulsions. We do these physical and mental rituals to try and get rid of the thoughts and the feelings. And at the start, normally our compulsions work, right? We're successful. We do a compulsion and we get some relief. Well, what happens? You can see here in step 6. We teach the fear center of the brain that we needed to do that compulsion to keep something bad from happening, to get rid of those feelings that we don't like, to get rid of those thoughts that we don't like. And so what happens is we teach the fear center we needed to do that behavior to stay safe. And so what happens? The cycle starts again. The thoughts come in. We attach a negative meaning. Oh, no, not again. Fear and other emotions come in. We have a desire to remove them. We do a compulsion. We confirm to the fear center we needed to do that compulsion to stay safe because we got some form of relief from it. And then the cycle starts over again. And before you know it, the cycle has spun so tightly that the gap between the thought, the feeling, and the relief that you get from your compulsions basically goes to zero. And now, the whole day, you're just flooded with intrusive thoughts, fear, and other emotions, and no compulsions that you do can bring you any relief. This exact same thing happened to me. For me, we'll use sexual orientation as an example. A thought would come in that maybe I would suddenly turn gay, right? And again, I have no issue with people's sexual orientation. It just felt ego dystonic to me or out of my true nature. I've always identified as a straight male. And so when these thoughts would come in, I would attach a meaning. Oh no, not this again. Not these thoughts. I thought I got rid of these thoughts. I thought we solved this problem. Anxiety would come rushing in. I mean, it would flood, my face would get flushed, my heart would start to pound. I would feel tremendously overwhelmed. And of course, I would then have this urge, this desire to do something about it, right? I was so scared. I'm like, oh my God, I just need to solve this problem. And so I would compulse. I would do research on Google. I would call up my mom. Hey, mom, can you tell me about what I was like as a child? Did I ever do anything that would make you think that maybe I'm a different sexual orientation than what I identify as? She would give me reassurance. I would feel temporary relief. I would teach the fear center of the brain that I needed to do that behavior. And then before you know it, I would be back in the cycle. So I want to take a second. Do you see your pattern by chance? Do you see how thoughts are coming in? Let's do health OCD as an example. Maybe thoughts from the moment you wake up, thoughts come rushing in, or you have this urge to check bodily sensations, right? So these thoughts come in that maybe you've got some sort of illness or something's wrong with your health. Of course, you attach negative meaning. This is bad. What if something's wrong with my health and I die or I get really sick or I get stuck in an illness? You feel a bunch of fear. You have a desire to remove it. And so you do a compulsion. Maybe you go Google symptoms. Well, you just taught that fear center of the brain that we needed to do that. And so while you might have gotten some temporary relief, slowly but surely those thoughts are going to creep back in and the cycle goes on and on and on. Now, the good news is we can step out of the cycle. We can step out of the cycle. We can teach our brains that these thoughts can happen and that we can step out of the cycle whenever we want. We might not be able to stop thoughts, but we can teach our brains not to care if they happen. So how does this work? Well, there are 3 points that you see arrows pointing at right now. We've got the 4 core responses, we've got the letting go technique, and we've got exposure and response prevention. So let's talk through each one. At the start, when we get triggered, the first point of attack where we have an opportunity to change how our brain relates to the thoughts is where we attach meaning. If we are able to shift from attaching negative meaning to being neutral towards the thoughts, well, we start to teach the fear center of the brain, hey, we don't need to care about this. This isn't something that we need to get overwhelmed by. We do this through the 4 core responses, which we'll talk about here in a second. But these 4 core responses are accepting statements, uncertain statements, indifference, which we can do with our body language, and then agreement or sarcastic agreement. And these 4 ways of responding to thoughts teaches the brain, the fear center specifically, that we're neutral to them. Where in the past, maybe we reacted with, oh, this is so bad, this is horrible. Now we're responding with more neutrality, more acceptance, and we're teaching the brain, oh, hey, this is okay. We don't need to get overwhelmed by this. And so the fire alarms, that fear center with the fire alarms going off, isn't as strong. The next point of attack is with the feelings. This is where the letting go technique comes in. And this is really what we think in our OCD coaching program is the secret sauce to OCD recovery. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, underneath all of these thoughts that we're experiencing is a feeling. Most of us can identify fear, and we get scared from the fear. We don't want to feel the fear. It feels scary and overwhelming. We feel like we're going to be stuck in it forever. But other feelings include overwhelm, anxiety, depression, fear, sadness, guilt, disgust, shame, anger, frustration. I mean, the list goes on, like I said earlier. And because we have a low tolerance to wanting to feel that feeling, we quickly move into here, where we try to remove it. But with our clients, what we say is, let's not actually push the feeling out. Let's bring the feeling up. Let's give ourselves permission to feel it in its entirety. And let's actually prove to ourselves that if we sit in the fear long enough, or any other emotion, it'll actually run itself out. That this emotion is actually just energy in the body that can be released. So this is where we think the letting go technique has been absolutely transformational for me and for our coaching clients. And then over here, we have exposure and response prevention. Now, exposure and response prevention is all about exposing ourselves to the things that are scaring us and then preventing a response. Well, what does that mean? It's basically saying, hey, we're not gonna do a compulsion. You have an urge to Google search something, we're not gonna do it. We're not going to Google search it. We're just going to let it be. Or I have this desire to ruminate over this. I need to problem solve this. If this thought comes in, I have to do something with it. Okay, well, can we say, never mind, we're not going to do that. And so with exposure and response prevention, what we're saying is, hey, we're going to resist our compulsions, and we're going to teach the fear center of the brain through our behavior by not doing these mental or physical compulsions that there was a problem. And so the fire alarms have way less likely of a chance of going off. So when you look at the cycle in its entirety and you look at the 3 points of attack really for us OCDers, you realize, okay, well, number one, right off the bat, when thoughts come in, we have the opportunity to start to reprogram the brain to look at it as neutral. When we do that, the feeling of anxiety over time will stop being as intense, right? So then it becomes more manageable to feel. Now we go to the next point of attack. Then the feeling, because it's easier to feel, we actually allow ourselves to feel it without trying to push it away, modify it, suppress it, or get rid of it. So now we let ourselves feel the feeling and we let it trickle away on its own time. And because we're now willing to allow ourselves to feel a feeling, we also don't feel that urge, like we did in step 4, to do our compulsions. And so we quite literally, we stop doing them as much. And because we stop doing them as much and eventually stop doing them altogether, we're able to exit the cycle. And anytime thoughts, images, sensations, urges, whatever, anytime these things, these symptoms bubble up, we're able to just go back to our techniques. And that's what I love about OCD recovery, is that there is a predictable process to it. So the OCD cycle is really, really important to understand. All of our coaching clients learn about it because then we can recognize and realize where we're at in the cycle and use these techniques to help ourselves break out of the cycle. So what are the 4 core responses? Well, I kind of alluded to them, but I want to share them with you here so you have them. And I'm sharing a bonus 5th one, which is non-engagement, which is where we try to get all of our clients to and where I spend the majority of my life. So when these thoughts, images, feelings come in, step 2, we have an opportunity to change our reaction. We have an opportunity to teach the brain that it's okay if these thoughts and feelings are here. So we can start with accepting statements. And it literally sounds like what it is. You can say to yourself, it's okay if this thought is here. It's fine. It's all right if it's here. It can come and go as it pleases. I'm not going to try to stop it, and it can pass on its own time. What this does is it opens up the brain versus trying to constrict it, trying to block it. And it basically says, hey, we can let all these thoughts bubble up and we're just going to let them pass on their own time. So it gives us some power, it gives us some agency over how we respond. Remember, we might not be able to control what thoughts bubble up, but no human being really can. At the end of the day, everybody has a fear center. That's where these thoughts are bubbling up from. And so it's within our power to control how we respond. So we can say, it's okay. It's all right. It's fine if these thoughts are here. They're allowed to be here, right? Very accepting. Then we have uncertain statements. Now, you might have heard of these before, right? These are our maybe, maybe nots. Maybe I would do this. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I am this. Maybe I'm not. And what this teaches the fear center of the brain is we don't need an answer. If you remember a few slides back on what OCD is, at its core, OCD is about problem solving. Problem solving is about finding an answer. Finding an answer is about having certainty. And the more that we desire certainty or desire having an answer, the more that we're going to be stuck in the cycle. So if we can teach our brains, hey, we don't need an answer. Maybe I am this, maybe I'm not. Maybe this would happen, maybe it wouldn't. We basically start to reprogram the fear center of the brain to say, look, we're not going to go for an answer on this one. It kind of is what it is, which leads me to indifference. It is what it is. Now, I always say this. I say this in my reels on Instagram. I say this with my coaching clients. I live this. One of the biggest differences that I have between my coaching clients and myself is this. Meh. The shoulder shrug. This is the moneymaker right here. And it's the easiest thing in the world. And why is this so important? Well, the fear center picks up on our body language. So if we're tense and cringed when a thought comes in, the fear center is going to pick up on that. But when a thought comes in, when a feeling comes in, if we're like, you know what, it's okay. It is what it is. This thought can be here. This feeling can be here. The thought bubbles up. You're going to harm somebody. Yeah, I mean, maybe. Maybe not. We're teaching the fear center of the brain. We're indifferent. We're neutral. It is what it is. We're okay with this thought being here. We're not going to try to problem solve it. People love this shoulder shrug. They love indifference. I love it too. It's one of the easiest ones to start implementing. You can start doing it now while you're watching this video or afterwards. And I would encourage you to do so. Then we have agreement or sarcastic agreement. This is where you might say, yeah, you're so right. This is going to happen, right? OCD goes, you're going to snap and harm somebody. Yeah, I know. Thanks. Thanks for the reminder. I appreciate it. Or your orientation's going to change. Yeah, I know. Okay. Or, you're going to harm a child. Yeah, okay. Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. All right. And you see, in the progression of things, normally the way that I see it with OCDers, and this was definitely the case with me, we get comfortable with these three, and then agreement is sort of the last one to go. Because agreeing feels scary. It's like, oh my God, if I agree with this thought, it's going to come true. And what I tell my clients is that on the other side of agreement is nothing. Because it was always just this junk content that OCD was bubbling up to try and get our attention. And when we agree with it, we basically just neutralize it. We're like, yeah, fine, whatever. That's going to happen. Totally. And it's like, oh my God, I used to be able to scare you with this content and now I can't. So it starts searching for other things to scare you with. So these are really effective. And then lastly, we have non-engagement. And this is where we eventually get to the point, I call it the 90-10 split, but it's not going to be like this at the start, especially if you're right at the start of OCD recovery, where it's just like, eventually you just kind of let thoughts and feelings come up and go as they please. You don't really engage with them. You just let them hang out back here. And you notice over time, when you let them hang out without doing compulsions, how it becomes lighter. It might still be here, but like I said with my clients, sometimes it feels like it's way back here. And you're like, it's kind of hanging out in the background, but it's not really bothering me. I can go about my life. And then sometimes it gets so far and so faint that it's almost like it's not even there. And so we do eventually try to get ourselves to non-engagement, but we always have the 4 core responses at our disposal. So make sure that you write these down because they're super important. So as you can see here, just as a recap, in the OCD cycle, the first thing that we have at our disposal, the first set of tools, is acceptance statements, uncertain statements, indifferent statements, agreement statements, and non-engagement. And that is going to make it so that we're teaching the brain to be more neutral, which means that the feelings will be less intense and we have less of a desire to compulse. When we have less of a desire to compulse, we teach the fear center of the brain we're not scared, and we start to move out of the cycle. Now let's talk ERP. What is ERP? ERP is to first gradually expose ourselves to the thoughts, urges, images, and sensations that cause us discomfort and fear. And secondly, we must then resist the urge to do physical or mental compulsions, which is the response prevention or behavioral part of ERP. And ERP works in a very predictable way. So at the start, you can see here we've got anxiety on one axis, time on the other. So, and we're going to talk about the two different forms of ERP here in a second. But basically, what happens is we expose ourselves to our fear, whatever that fear is. Maybe you have a fear of harming somebody or picking up a knife and stabbing someone. Maybe one of your exposures is you have to stand in the kitchen and be near knives. Maybe you've been avoiding knives altogether, right? You just won't even go into the kitchen out of fear that you're going to snap. So now what we do is we say, hey, we want to have you stand in the kitchen. This is going to spike your anxiety, right? You can see that here. This is the anxiety spike. And now we want you to stay in the kitchen with the anxiety spiked without compulsing for as long as you possibly can. They say that the rule of thumb is when the anxiety cuts in half. So that'd be, somewhere right here, where essentially, let's say that this is a 10 out of 10 right here. Your anxiety is spiked to 10. Well, we want to wait until it's about a 5. Now, if you can stay in that exposure until it goes down to as close to 0 as possible, that can also be really beneficial too. Now, what do we notice? Let's say the next day, or you do this every single day. It's a little bit different for everyone, but just for this example, let's say a couple days you've been doing this exposure. And by the 5th day, when you go into the kitchen, you're no longer spiking at a 10 out of 10. You're spiking out of an 8 out of 10. So now your halfway point is down here. And you're noticing, oh my gosh, it's taking me less time to start to feel more calm towards this. And by the 10th day of standing in the kitchen around knives, look at where you're at now. You're at a 6, and a 3 is right about here. And so now you're about right here, right? So now your time has significantly begun to dwindle. And then before you know it, and this is what I love about ERP, you do that same exposure, and what once caused you a 10 out of 10 is now here at a 2 or below. And look at that. You're at a 1 before you know it. You're yawning. You're almost like, oh, this is so boring. I don't want to stand in this kitchen anymore. I get it. Whatever. If I pick up a knife, fine. If I harm somebody, fine. I'm over this. I'm not really scared anymore. And you can think about this with public speaking, right? Human beings are terrified of public speaking. It's rated as one of the top fears for all human beings. My prior business was public speaking. I'd travel the country, speak to thousands of college students. I'd be in rooms of thousands, right? Thousands of kids. Okay, at the start of the speaking season, my heart would be pounding out of my chest on the first speech. But by the 10th, by the 15th, and certainly by the end of the season, I could take a nap before the speech. I had to get myself pumped up to go on stage because I had habituated. I had taught myself that I can go on stage, spike my anxiety, and still do the thing, aka give the speech, while feeling scared, and allow my anxiety to naturally come down on its own. And that's what ERP is. They call it habituation, but at the end of the day, all we're doing is we're training the brain that it can tolerate discomfort, that we can feel uncomfortable emotions, and we can actually release them, right? And that's why this confidence builds up over reps. You can see it right here, right? These are reps. Every time you would go do this exposure, you learn, oh my gosh, I thought that this was going to be the worst thing in the world. I did it, and I'm still here. I guess I can try this again. And so in that sense, we learn how to teach the brain how to not fear these thoughts and feelings anymore. We habituate, we're able to step out of the cycle. Of course, noting we can't do our compulsions. That's a key to this. If you do the exposure and then do a compulsion, that's just teaching the brain that we were at risk. So you can see that here, habituation. So let's go through the cycle again. First point of attack is attaching meaning. But when we're thinking about this through utilizing ERP, we are intentionally exposing ourselves to thoughts, images, sensations, things that scare us. We are, in the exposure, we can use our techniques, right? But we're allowing the feeling to come in, deliberately spiking anxiety and other emotions. And then we're choosing not to do a compulsion. And if we stay in that feeling long enough to let it cut in half or even lower, we teach our brain there wasn't a threat. And so little by little, we work our way out of the cycle. So just recapping that there. So how do you do ERP? Well, there's 2 ways. There's imaginal and there's in vivo. In vivo is just a fancy way of saying this involves directly exposing yourself to feared situations in real life. The example, picking up a knife and holding it around your loved one, right? Maybe you have a fear of harming someone, and eventually through exposure work, you get to the point where you're like, I'm going to pick up this knife and I'm going to hold it around my wife, or I'm going to hold it around my husband, and I'm just going to trust that I'm not going to snap. Now, I think it's really important to mention that in vivo exposures should never put you in any real danger, right? So we don't want you to do exposures in places that could actually cause you significant harm. And it's always advised that you do exposure work with somebody who's trained in exposure work and can be there, whether that be in person or virtually, to support you. On the other side, we have imaginal scripting. We're big fans of imaginal scripting over here because it allows you to confront feared thoughts and feared consequences using your imagination by quite literally writing out the worst case scenario coming true on a piece of paper, then recording it on your phone and just listening to it on repeat over and over and over and over again until you get bored with it. And so this is habituation. This is like the graph. But the cool thing about OCD recovery is that the brain can't really tell the difference between something happening in real life and something happening in our imagination. So we can put our brains in that feared scenario just by writing it down and then listening to it. So I think that that's really, really powerful. Imaginal scripting, a combination of the two is ideal. Imaginal scripting was instrumental in my OCD recovery journey, and it's probably one of the biggest reasons why I've gotten to a place that I have now. So I wanted to share that with you. Now I want to talk to you about the letting go technique. And as I've alluded to, this is sort of our secret sauce in OCD recovery. So what is the letting go technique? Well, it's a technique that was founded. There were some other individuals involved in this, but I'm a big fan of Dr. David Hawkins' work. So this was founded by Dr. Hawkins. And as you can see here, the letting go technique is a method for releasing suppressed emotions that are often at the root of OCD. By allowing ourselves to fully feel emotions like fear, anger, or sadness without resistance or judgment, we can gradually let them pass through us, reducing their hold on our thoughts. And think about that for a second, right? Think about how many times you've had a feeling come in when thoughts are there that you've wanted to get rid of. How many times you've thought about the fear and been like, oh no, I don't want to feel this again. Or the sadness comes in and you're like, I don't want to feel this. Or anger and frustration comes in and you get frustrated that you're feeling frustrated, or you get scared that you're feeling scared, or you get sad that you're sad, or you feel guilty that you're angry, or guilty that you're scared, or guilty that you're sad. You feel guilty that you're sad, right? All of it is a feeling. So in our program, we obviously we believe in a combination of these techniques, but what we believe is we don't even need to pay attention to the thoughts. The thoughts are just junk content. In fact, the thoughts are just the brain attempting to rationalize and make sense of the feeling underneath. And if we were able to just cut directly to the feeling and allow ourselves to feel the feeling in its entirety without trying to suppress it, modify it, or change it, and we didn't engage with the thoughts, we just let them bubble up while we're focused on the feeling, eventually we would be able to let the feelings pass through. And they call this a release. It's when you can literally feel that the feeling has left, that it was there, it felt intense, and we stayed with it. We didn't try to change it, and it left us in its own time. And this can give us the confidence to not run away from feelings, but instead look at feelings as an opportunity, right? And for all of us, myself included, this is a skill that we are not taught. We're not taught how to feel feelings. Every human being, most human beings, I should say, are taught to suppress emotions, keep ourselves busy, right? Keep ourselves distracted. How many times have you received that piece of advice? Just keep yourself busy, keep yourself distracted. What is that? That's escapism. That's trying to get away from the feelings. Some of us just try to push them down. Oh, nope, not this feeling. I'm getting rid of this feeling. Nope, don't want to feel this. And we try to push it down. Well, these feelings don't just disappear. They get built up in our brains and bodies, and eventually they bubble over. So it's so much better if we can systematically bring these feelings up, feel them, and release them in their own time. And that's a big skill that we teach our clients. And it's from what we've seen. Again, this is with me in my life. I put everything we teach, I've put to test for my brain. With our clients, we've seen that it's very successful. And you can see it here, right? Every emotion is measurable, right? It vibrates from a frequency. So on the lower side, shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, desire, anger. Look at all these, right? These are all emotions. Pride. These are all emotions that us OCDers can experience. What we're looking at here is Dr. Hawkins' work. And so in OCD recovery, the goal is to actually allow ourselves to feel all these various emotions versus suppressing them so that we can naturally move up into higher frequencies, so that we can, why do they say willingness is the key indicator for OCD recovery? Why do they say that? Because when somebody's willing, They've moved themselves up the emotional scale. They're ready to move into the higher emotional states. Why do they say that acceptance is one of the key tools in OCD recovery? Because it's literally a higher emotional state. And then, of course, we can move into love, joy, and peace. So when people will say, Zach, I think I'm just going to accept that I'm going to feel scared my entire life. Interestingly enough, it's paradoxical because they've started to create acceptance. And that acceptance that maybe they're going to feel anxiety allows them to feel that fear without trying to change it, modify it, suppress it, or get rid of it, which then moves them up the emotional scale. And so we can do this whenever we want. We can use this skill whenever we want, and it's something that we can have for the long term. It's something that I use in my life and has literally been a game changer. I'm so grateful for the letting go technique, and that's why I really felt it was important to share it with you here. So how do you do it? Well, the formal way, if you want, is to allow yourself to bring up a feeling. Maybe you want to feel some fear. So you go, okay, you close your eyes, you sit in a quiet space, maybe you set a timer for 10 minutes, and you just say, you think of something that's scaring you, right? You can ask yourself, what is my now feeling? Maybe you think to yourself, well, I'm feeling scared. And then you go, well, could I allow myself to welcome in this feeling? Could I allow myself to feel the feeling of fear? Maybe it's a yes, maybe it's a no. Dr. Hawkins would say, continue on. Ask the next question. Could I let go of trying to get rid of this feeling? Could I allow it to be here? Yes or no? Am I willing to let it go? Could I let it go? Is it possible? And then, am I willing? Do I have the courage to let go and just allow myself to feel this feeling? And when? When am I going to have that courage? When am I going to have that moment? Is it now? Is it in the future? And so you can go through this process. Of course, it's advised to do it with somebody who understands the process and has been through it themselves and understand how it works, but at least wanted to share. These are the 5 questions that you can use to go through that process. And when we ask those questions, how does it help? Well, we talked about it on the last slide. It moves us up into higher frequencies. So maybe you're stuck down here right now in the lower frequencies, but you don't have to stay there. That is a fallacy. That is a lie that OCD tells us. And we can use the letting go technique to move up into higher frequencies. And so this is where it all comes together. We can use our phrases to change the meaning. We can use the letting go technique to teach ourselves how to feel feelings versus trying to suppress them and push them down. We can use ERP to expose ourselves and then retrain our brains that we don't have to do compulsions. And through that, we can teach our brains that there was never a threat, that it was junk content all along and we could just let it go. And when we do that, when we implement these skills, we're able to step out of the OCD cycle. And we're able to do it consistently, so we never have to fear a relapse because we know, hey, we have these skills. We can use them whenever we need them. So you can find, if you're, I did not have the time in this workshop to keep it short. I can't get into the intricacies and the details of the letting go technique, but you can find Dr. Hawkins' book on Amazon or on Audible if you prefer to listen to it. I think it could be very helpful. Of course, we recommend working with a licensed therapist or an OCD coach that is well-versed in OCD recovery and can guide you correctly through the process. And then lastly, we have what we like to call a brain health centric lifestyle. This is where we start to get into living a life that is conducive to long-term recovery. And we sort of look at this as the base, right? Like this is foundational. If we can kind of set up this foundation in our day-to-day life, we're going to create the conditions for long-term recovery. One of those being getting that 8 to 10 hours of sleep per night. I wish that I would have known this at the start of my OCD recovery journey, just how important sleep was, because I really neglected that. And once I started to get 8 to 10 hours of sleep per night, my mood was improved, my anxiety was much less, and I was much happier on average. So we really encourage our clients to do that. Develop a 10 to 15 minute meditation practice every single day. I meditate every single day for no more than 10 to 15 minutes, and I'm just going to tell you right now, it is the biggest difference. Obviously, besides ERP and the letting go technique, meditation is the single most important thing that I incorporated into my life, and I feel that it's probably one of the biggest reasons why I've recovered to a level that a lot of OCDers never do. Because meditation is not about zeroing your brain out of thoughts, but instead it's about teaching you and your brain how to sit with thoughts and feelings without trying to suppress them, change them, or modify them. So it's a very important skill. And then, of course, daily movement. You learned a little bit about emotions on this workshop, so we know that emotions are just an energy. And these energies build up inside of us throughout a day. And so movement is a great way to naturally release stress, anxiety, fear, overwhelm. So we sort of look at these as the three core components on a daily basis to help manage long-term recovery. And then, of course, you've got diet, supplements, cultivating a healthy support network, monitoring substance usage, spending time in nature, and then we're big fans of acupuncture because energy meridians run throughout the body, and acupuncture targets those energy meridians, which can cause us to feel less anxiety, less fear, less overwhelm, and allows us to release emotions in a really, really healthy. So we, of course, go more in depth with our coaching clients, but wanted to share this with you here as a roadmap to get started on little by little. These are all practices that our clients implement, have helped them achieve long-term recovery, and obviously everything on here is what I live, has been super beneficial. So let's talk OCD long-term recovery recap. Write these down, start to little by little piece this together, and this is going to help you get on track. So of course we encourage you, if you have to do OCD recovery on your own, totally understand. That's why I wanted to create this workshop to give you the blueprint. But it's advised to work with a licensed professional that understands OCD at a deep level, or work with an OCD coach that has been through that recovery journey and knows how to guide you because they've recovered, they're back in a good place in their lives, and they know that step-by-step process, right? So if you have to do it alone, that's okay, but of course would advise to do it with a team. So if I were you, if this was 2016, Zach, I would get a list of my compulsions together. All right, I would become aware of what are the compulsions I'm doing, thinking back to that OCD cycle and how it's keeping me stuck. I would develop an ERP plan. Okay, what are the real life exposures I'm going to do? What are the imaginal exposures that I'm going to do? And every single day, I'm going to chip away at those, doing a little bit of work each day. Maybe I have to step ladder up, right? Doing a 1 out of 10, a 2 out of 10, a 3 out of 10, working my way up to a 2 out of, or a 10 out of 10 exposure, but putting a plan there. You can even look into understanding your core fear. The idea behind this is that underneath all of these surface level thoughts is a deeper seated fear. And once we identify that, we're actually able to do exposure work towards that core fear and teach our brains not to care about it. Of course, I recommend utilizing the letting go technique. Hawkins' book is a great place to start. Incorporating a brain health centric lifestyle. This is what's going to lead to long-term recovery. You want to discover your medication options. I think medication could be a very, very important part of the OCD recovery journey. Everybody's different. Some people take medication, some people don't. I think all options are on the table. But if you're going to take medication, I highly, highly encourage you to do the other aspects of OCD recovery because that's what's going to lead to that higher quality of life. And then incorporate some holistic healing, right? Whether that be acupuncture, some of the other things that we discussed in this workshop today. So hopefully you can take a screenshot of this or take some notes. And I'll conclude the workshop by saying you can go to ocdcoachingservices.com to learn more about our services. And you can also consume our helpful content on OCD recovery best practices there. We have obviously this workshop here, and we'll be adding blog posts little by little that share best practices on how to reclaim your life from OCD. From one fellow OCDer to the next, I wish you all the best in your journey. Please, please know, and the Zach from 2016 could have benefited from hearing this. Hope for recovery is possible. If you're in that dark place right now, I know what it feels like. I've been there. The brain feels chaotic. The body feels dysregulated. You have all this anxiety and fear and overwhelm and sadness. And it might feel like, Zach, I don't even know where to begin. Use this resource. Watch it over and over if you have to start to get that information, and then little by little start to implement it. And I promise you, you can get your life back. It is possible. You're not alone. I'm rooting for you, and I hope to speak to you soon.